My name is Richard Syllaboy. I am the Vice Chief of the Mi'kmaq Nation here in Aroostook County. Brown ash is our creation story. Our creation story is that when Glooskap got on Earth here, and they created the trees and the grass and the animals and everything. Then they wanted something to look out at and take care of the animals. So Glooskap shot an arrow into a brown ash tree, and the natives come out dancing and singing. And, that's the creation story for the Wabanaki people.
Well, the history of the Mi'kmaq goes back a long ways. When it comes to this tribe in particular, it's just a few generations. But when you go back to the Mi'kmaq itself, you have to go back to when the Ice Age had begun and all this and so on. And nobody really knows exactly the dates and so on, but we all know from this perspective that when you're thinking about the Mi'kmaqs, we are just in a linguistics or language perspective, one of the Algonquin languages. There are many that are around not only our area, but they go into the Cree area as well. So it's a huge map when you think about the Algonquin language. So it's really difficult to really take a look at where Mi'kmaq begins and all this, because of course with the Ice Age and the ice melting, it really made it difficult to really estimate when people started living here. But as far as the Mi'kmaq go, we lived in the Atlantic provinces for many years. In Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, parts of Quebec, Maine, and Newfoundland. There are other Wabanaki tribes. The other Wabanaki tribes are the Abenakis, the Maliseets or the Wolastoq people, the Passamaquoddy or Paskatamo'gatti, and the Penobscots, Banawapskek. And so those tribes, again, they're a part of the Algonquin language. And so they are part of it themselves. And also our perspective is that, they intertwine with one another when we talk about language and also history.
My thinking, somewhere in the past, I don't know where, I don't know how far back, but I'm thinking that we were one tribe.
We've had many wars prior to European arrival with the Mohawks. It was not just the Mi'kmaq, it was also the other tribes as well. The Mohawks would try to encroach into our area and want to take over our land, because our land was basically our means of survival. It was, the amount of food that was there as far as game and resources, fish and so on. So it's when you talk about the history, it was not until Europeans arrived, when the English had arrived, we had already been speaking Portuguese, and we were talking in Portuguese trade language, and so the English or the British at that time had known that there were other people who had come here prior to them. And so afterwards, not long after the British, there were other European, I don't want to say immigrants, but they were people that were leaving Europe, because at that time Europe had they had depleted their resources. They had cut too many trees, had overfished, and so on, and it was all in the means of economy. So when they moved to our area, they needed land in order to get some of the resources that they needed to make such ships and so on, and the food that would feed the people that were working. And so afterwards, the land was depleting for the Mi'kmaq and other Wabanaki tribes, and so we were designated into what we call today reservations.
You know, part of our oral teachings and stories is that we're hunters gatherers. We mainly fish during the spring and summer seasons up to fall, pretty much out in the sea. We're always on the coast. We migrated to the coast. Nomadic people, I guess they called us. During the winter, that's when we start going back inland. As people know, in this area, our winters are quite harsh, can be brutal. So we go inland, and that's where we set up camp, and then we hunt whatever we need there. You know, it's just a cycle. A lot of people don't realize that we hunt it and fish in different spots. Some people believe we went to the same camp every year, or we went to the same coast every year. But we moved around. That way we don't deplete our resources. And that's the fish and the wildlife and so forth.
But when people talk about where we're at today, we have to go back and think about how did the reservation system get into play. And it was done through the Centralization Act. And the Centralization Act was enacted so that any Native American individual would be living just within the reservation. And so it's difficult to really say, because at one time this was all our land, and now we were enclosed into one designated area. And so you would have many people from many areas moving into one little area, and so they would have different reservations for us.
The Mi'kmaq Nation is here in Aroostook County, but the greater Mi'kmaq Nation is throughout 5 provinces of eastern Canada, and that's Quebec, New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and Newfoundland. There's about 31 different reservations in Mi'kmaq Nation, and the only one in the United States is the one here in Aroostook County, and so we will probably be the only ones ever to have a ban in the state of Maine. A lot of people that came here for work. You know, they came to rake blueberries, they came to pick potatoes, they worked in the woods, loggers, you know, and stuff like that. A lot of Mi'kmaqs did that, and they ended up staying. But also, a lot of the people that come out of residential schools, they lost their culture and their language. They probably didn't even know which reserve they belonged to. You know, didn't know their families, and a lot of them came right across the border. And here in Holton, everybody always crossed in Holton. Even people from up in Quebec, when they come down, they'd come down to Woodstock and cross over here. And I have 6 boys that are my siblings, and they would hang around town, you know, and they would meet these people and bring them home. Our door was open, and that's only half a mile from where we are right now. And then they would tell their stories of what happened, what they went through, and of course Mother would tell me to go to bed, and I'd lay there and I'd listen to these horror stories. And they did have some horror stories that, you know, about what they went through and what happened to them.
So in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, right, on Indian Township Reservation, they found some old documents tucked away in somebody's shoebox, and it was a treaty. You know, it was early 1800s treaty, and it had to deal with, you know, the Passamaquoddies, Maliseets, and the Micmacs and friends, right? And in that treaty, it said that, you know, we own the whole state, you know, and that you know, and it kind of goes back to, you know, it's kind of tied into even the Treaty of Watertown, and how the Indians that fought on the side of the United States were promised land, right? So this Colonel Allen guy, he was the guy that came up and was the one trying to keep the Indians at bay, and you know, and that treaty was a result of that, because the Indians were fed up with, you know, every time they moved someplace, the Micmac tribe would move to a place, they would be, you know, encroached upon, shot at, things like that. So the chief wasn't okay with that. He wanted to be far enough away that, you know, the non-Indigenous people were, you know, far enough away that they wouldn't have contact with them. So, you know, they were up in arms about that. So when they found the treaty, then the Indians they felt they had rights, right? There was 3 established reservations. There was a Penobscot, there was and the 2 Passamaquoddy reservations. And the Micmacs were kind of scattered throughout the same way the Maliseets were. And it wasn't that we weren't a part of a tribe, it's that we weren't organized, you know, in a way that the other tribes were. We didn't have a land base because of, you know, we still have a population down still in, you know, the Cherryfield area. You know, that's where the Mi'kmaq were, down that way. So as a result of that, them finding that's what started the 1980s land claim.
When the Micmacs were left out of the Settlement Act of 1980, in 81, they got together. I did not attend that meeting, but they got together at Echo Lake, I think. Or one of the lakes. Might have been at the park. And they had their first meeting there. And the Micmacs did. Then they, Harold Prince, the anthropologist that helped us, I believe he was there, and he worked on a grant, got a small grant from one of the philanthropists, and ended up got enough to get an office space. We got that on 8 Church Street. And it was in 82 that I participated the first time. I was asked, you know, to get involved and participate, so I did. And my cousin Paul was elected president of the organization, and I was elected vice president of the organization, and we worked on a 501c3 and got that, and then we qualified for other grants at that time. Pine Tree Legal did a lot of work for us, you know, and we didn't have to pay them anything, and you know, we just supported anything that they were doing, as well as them doing, you know, a lot of work for us. And Ann Heald, who just passed away this spring, she was the one that really brought us through and got us into recognition effort. You know. And she worked with Hobbs, Strauss, Dean and Wilder, a law firm out of Washington, D.C. And they're the ones that kind of told us what was the best way to go. Yep. You know, so. And we've had elections every 2 years since. When we was going for recognition, I worked for the tribe. I worked for the nonprofit, and I did a lot of surveys and met with a lot of people. And at the time of our recognition, we had 392 members. And each one of those 392 members had to have connections to one of the reservations in Canada. That was to prove that they were Micmac. You know. But what I found out by doing surveys, and meeting with people. All the Micmacs from southern Aroostook, we all come from Nova Scotia. Mars Hill, Presque Isle area, all of those Micmacs came from Big Cove, eastern New Brunswick. North, Caribou and north, all of those Micmacs came from Restigouche, Mariah. It was, yeah, I was sitting there one day and that come to me and I said, well, ain't this something? Even as Micmacs in Aroostook County, we kind of isolated ourselves.
Why'd they set up the headquarters in Presque Isle instead of down here?
Well, at the time, I think it was a largest population, and it was more central. We had people from down here, we had people from up Fort Kent, Easton, and so Presque Isle was more or less the central location. So, and when I think it was in 82, 83 that we got a small grant to get an office, and we put that in Presque Isle. It was on 8 Church Street, and that office was there for close to 10 years. When the air base, Lorient Air Force Base, closed, that property is put out for bid, and it could be the Native Tribes is a government agency, just like the Air Force is a government agency. So anybody that puts in for this property that's vacant, can get it. We didn't get the property that I wanted because I wanted a piece of Lorient that had the school, and it had the hospital, it had a lot of housing, that. And I happened to get done working there for a while, and they never pursued that. But we ended up with 800 acres of, very, very contaminated land, So, and we've been studying PFAS on the Lorient property now for about 3-4 years, and it don't look good. Yeah, any land that we purchase, it goes into trust. We can put it in the trust with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and once that goes into trust, then we don't have to pay taxes on that. It takes a while. It takes a few years to get a piece of property and put it into trust, but being patient, it'll happen. See, we're not reservation Indians. The Passamaquoddy got 2 reservations. Penobscot has 1 reservation. We're not a reservation. We have land in trust, and that makes a big difference. Give you an example. There was a phone company here in Holton. Well, it come out of Unity, and they sold out, and there was a part of it here in Holton. And when I signed up for that company to get a phone, I got a discount, and that discount was $35 off on something like a $49 bill. So it was really a good discount. So U.S. Cellular purchased that company, and when I went down to get a phone from the U.S. Cellular program, I inquired about that discount, and they said no. So I put in a complaint to the Public Commission, Utilities Public Commission, and they sided with me, saying that I deserved the discount, because other people were getting it. And then U.S. Cellular appealed that, and when they appealed it, I didn't have no more to say about it. The final decision was going to be with U.S. Cellular, and U.S. Cellular said that that discount is for reservation Indians, and where we had land in trust, we did not qualify for that. So,
is there any possibility for land that's in trust to ever become a reservation?
I'm not sure if that is a possibility or not. You know, and it probably should be something that we could, you know, look into in the future. You know, but you know, we have about 100 acres here with this piece of property here, and we got 11 units on it, plus the office down there ways, and we got about a little over 100 acres across the road. That is a tree farm. Yeah, we got a piece of property in Island Falls. We got a piece of property in Bridgewater. We got a piece of property, not very big, down in Mount Vernon. That an elderly lady heard about us and fighting for recognition, and she donated that. I think it's 11 acres. You know, and of course got Bon Air and Caribou, Spruce Haven, and Connor. You know, so it's quite a few pieces, but we got 2, 3, 4 different communities.